Welcome everyone in this new Talking with Francesco series. Today is episode number 224, if I'm correct. And today I have a dear friend, and usually the normal flow is that I meet someone on Twitter. Then we make this event, and then I meet them in person. In this case, it didn't go exactly like that. I was almost sure that we already made this collaboration, and then so I typed on my YouTube channel like Marino, but I couldn't find him. So I said, okay, so let's fix this. and so Marino, we met in London about one year ago. Can't remember. Almost
Almost,
1 year
almost,
ago. Almost one
almost.
year ago. So welcome. Please introduce yourself, then so we can get started with your journey. We talk about, of course, DevOps, cool stuff today. Maybe even the HashiCorp news today. So it's like also good tech news. Marino, welcome, and please again introduce yourself. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Francesco, and hello everyone. My name is Marino Wijay. I'm an engineer at a company called Commodore, but I'm also a Canadian. So I've lived here all my life, and I've been in the tech space for about just over 2 decades now. And there are a lot of interesting patterns and cycles that I've seen, but at the same time, a lot of interesting folks that I've met throughout my journey. Francesco, you're one of them, and so I'm really excited to be here, and here to chat with y'all and talk to y'all about what DevOps versus platform engineering is, and anything else you want to talk about.
Yes, and I think this title can be very interesting to talk about because I think that many people they can confuse the two things, the two roles, maybe they overlap at 20-30%. I'll let you give your point of view. But before that, the reason why I started making this whole series is that I wanted to know more about my friends, people I meet, because sometimes we have these tech accounts, and I understand this. I also have that, but of course, I would like to know like your story. How did you get into tech? A little bit of your background, and then we'll get into more. Of course, we'll have time to talk about the Dockerization, Kubernetes, and other stuff like that. So, Marina, a bit more about yourself. How did you get into tech?
It was 1995, 96, I think, and the first computer came home. Like this was the very first computer, desktop. I think it was like IBM desktop or something. My mom bought it because she was getting into development. She was starting to become a developer. And my curiosity gets the best of me. So I see this shiny new object and I'm like, hey, let's play around. Let's get acclimated with this new box thing that does a lot of things. And I've never used a keyboard in my life, but let's learn. And I began to realize how much I enjoyed just tinkering around with a computer system. And that evolved into, I have my own computer. I need internet connectivity. How do I do this when my room is all the way up here and internet is like all the way in the basement? And it turned into let's deploy wireless networking because that was the thing like way back in, I think around the 2003, 2004 timeframe. So I was like one of the first in my neighborhood to have wireless networking. And so everyone else is like, hey, I want a wireless network too. And it just became a little bit of a tiny business where I would go around and set it up. And that just gave me a passion for working in the space of tech. Like I just enjoyed all this hacking and all this messing around. I even pursued some education in this space as well, and managed to work in different kinds of roles and environments that brought me to the point where you see tech domains, you see how tech evolves, but then you also meet some very interesting individuals that change your perspective on how tech should be or how tech should be built. And then you also add the dimension of how do you build in an ethical manner as well. So a lot of that has come to 20 years in this industry. I realize that there's on one hand we could keep becoming those engineers, we could keep honing our skills, but then there's also a new uh, set of folks that are coming into this space. Let's impart knowledge onto them and teach them some of the ways to build, but also teach them about the pitfalls and the traps to avoid so that they could have a successful career themselves, and even just learn how tech is so cyclical.
Yes, it's interesting, and I was ready to hear like a very long story when you started to say like in the 90s. I remember that I think you made
Back in
like
the
a
90s.
concise concise version. No, I'm joking, but no, it's interesting. I remember also I was the first person who had the internet connection when I was 12, and it's hard for like a teenager, like, not even a teenager, a 12, for a child basically explain like what do you have at home? Like I have this thing at home, so it's hard to explain. And this is, of course, it's revealing our age, of course, but it's interesting about also the wireless thing. So usually I have one question, which is like, which is your favorite part in the stack in tech? Maybe I already know the answer, but I would like to make this question anyway. Like, why? Like, what is your favorite stack and why?
You know, I'm sure folks that maybe if you're on following me on Twitter or see some of the stuff I do, you would probably figure out that I enjoy seeing a packet flow. I enjoy networking. I enjoy connecting things together. That not only extends to tech, but it extends to life as well. Like connecting with people is a huge thing. But bringing it back to tech, right? The connectivity problem will always be a problem because we're talking about roads and laneways that move data around. But we also realize that data comes in so many shapes and sizes and forms that our roads have to kind of accommodate in different ways. So it's been fascinating to watch networking go from very physical to let's use software in different ways to manipulate how a network looks and then optimize it for applications. So short answer is I love networking. Why is because over my career, I've always found learning something new can start with networking for me. Follow the packet, follow why that IP address is that IP address, follow DNS and understand a host name. And when I think about these things, that is applicable to so many different systems out there. If you start there, you begin to try and figure out and you begin to understand how something is built, how something communicates, how it works. And that's just my own thinking, right? Others have different approaches, but for me, networking has been always it that allowed me to understand other domains, like even AI for that matter, is an area that, maybe I don't understand how LLMs work, but there are people out there that have built very interesting systems using LLMs, using a little bit of that networking, and I start there. So that's my recommendation to folks. Pick something you already know and then branch out that way so that you can expand your tech domains and knowledge as well.
Yes, I still remember, maybe you don't, but I remember one comment of yours when I think I released no, maybe a long video about Docker, and your comment was like, what about networks? Like, so I remember a comment like that. So this really shows like your passion. And of course, this can also be turned into like a Docker networking podcast, but no, maybe only if you ask for that, you can still drop your questions. And yes, so nice, Marino. Thank you. So I would like to slowly get into the main topic because the topic is like DevOps and platform engineering. So some people might even say that it's the same thing. So maybe we can start uh, by you like giving your experience in DevOps and platform engineering, and then we slowly try to understand what's the difference, how you interpret this difference, and of course, if you want, you can also drop all your questions, especially if they are related to DevOps or Marino's career or everything else you want. So, Marino, let's start to write this Docker file.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's start with what DevOps actually is. And for those that are very unfamiliar with this term, it's been around for a while, and it's just really the marriage of development and operations. The idea stems from this fact that you have technologies and processes that you need to implement that align operations to your development patterns. And what's interesting is Google coined this idea that your SREs are the ones that implement DevOps practices, technology, and tooling. What's interesting though is over the years, we've also seen this title of DevOps engineer, and it's become very mysterious as to what they actually do and what they're responsible for. If we go back in time to when we used to do things very manually, repetitive tasks, for example, chewed up unnecessary amounts of time. So the moment we started automating with systems like Bash or scripting, we basically started the realms of DevOps. But we also had to build a practice around it of how we build things in a very simplistic, easy to understand manner, repeatable manner for that matter, as well as in a system where others can collaborate and contribute that add to an overall life cycle of something. So that comes with some principles like how do we ensure reliability? How do we ensure scalability? How do we ensure access to tooling wherever we need it? And how do we ensure integrations, but also leverage a lot of our development practices to build all of this? Codify as much as we possibly can because our code now becomes kind of a living document of what infrastructure looks like. So we start there. Let's start with infrastructure. The DevOps infrastructure means to automate it in a variety of ways. We could use various tools out there to automate the provisioning of infrastructure, and we can go and tinker with that automation whenever we wanted to. There are a lot of systems that helped with that automation too, by controlling aspects of releasing and also controlling aspects of who has access to what, by controlling access of flagging so that you can enable certain features and disable others as well, which ties into this concept of continuous integration and continuous delivery or deployment. Now, in a CI/CD system, it's almost a cycle, right? I build something, I add it into my version control. Some system is going to compile it. Some system is going to take that compilation or compiled binary and throw it onto a real estate environment where it runs, and then we monitor it, and then we make changes to it as we need to. And that whole process happens all over again. That is DevOps, right? Because we are now trying to remove the friction between devs, velocity, and operational tasks that have to happen. So in a lot of organizations, even today, you will find that DevOps practices are, full and far all the way throughout, because we've obviously learned from the fact that we shouldn't be blaming people. We should be blaming processes that are actually broken. And so we go after fixing those processes so that they become better. And then we prevent things like outages altogether. Now, fast forward to today, there's this whole DevOps versus platform engineering. Some folks might even have heard of, DevOps is dead and long live platform engineering. DevOps and platform engineering are almost the same thing in that platform engineering is just an evolution of using a lot of those DevOps practices, right? We still don't want to blame people. We still don't want to do things imperatively or, make changes on the fly. We want to agree upon them, use that whole Git and PR request process to make those changes for our apps and our infrastructure and let it flow through automation. Where platform engineering comes into the mix is where I now have all of these different systems that need to be tied together somehow. And I need to present a single API to whoever wants to consume this. What shouldn't happen is development teams shouldn't need to be hopping into several different APIs to build their app. They shouldn't even need to hop into several APIs to test their application if that's what they're trying to do. They should be served up with a single platform or a single API or even CLI for that matter that says, hey, take what I have built and then you go do what you think is necessary for it to land somewhere and in production at some point. Where the platform engineering piece comes in is finding the right system that allows you to add in the necessary tooling and pieces and then present that to that end user or that developer as the single API. That's what platform engineering is, plus the reliability, plus making sure that we've constantly updated our systems, plus making sure we have zero vulnerabilities. And this becomes very extensive to the point that, wait, this just sounds like a sysadmin's role expanded out, right? Now, platform engineering is actually just what we are doing for the longest time. It's also a marketing term, right? I think of it as a marketing term because there are a few companies that actually coined it probably a few years back, and it just became a buzzword. It became something that, hey, everyone has to now do platform engineering. But I'll tell you something, and I'll be very explicit about this. This existed a long time ago. If you've ever worked with a technology called Heroku or even Cloud Foundry, these are platform engineered solutions that have existed for more than a decade. If you ever worked with Google Cloud Platform or AWS, these are platform engineered solutions that offer up a platform to achieve an outcome. And that's exactly what we're trying to build with platform engineering. all in all, I mean, nothing's changed. We've just wrapped another label or slapped another label on things we do, and we're calling it something different.
This is exactly what I thought. By the way, hi Emma, and but I can say that like I don't know, releasing a video like DevOps is dead, like long life of platform engineering can get a lot of views. I know I didn't make it, but I understand. I understand perfectly. So it's interesting, and I love the think like of like labeling things. Maybe we can say that there is like a different so from what I understood, platform engineering probably has more responsibilities even in choosing which platform. Instead of DevOps engineer, let's say it's more, don't want to say lower level, but let's say it's more focused, I don't know, on creating the process, creating the Docker file. So it's like more in the creation, more probably in the initial phase, I would say. So I don't know if you agree or not.
Yeah, it
You
is
can also
actually
disagree.
DevOps actually was the initial phase. I think what ends up happening is you have all of these systems and you need a way to encompass it together. And platform engineering happens to be the right wording to make that a reality, as interesting as it sounds, right? What it actually is enterprise architecture and then providing the serviceability and usage and accessibility to whoever wants to consume it. And that's what platform engineering aims to be. I will tell you though that recently when I was in Raleigh, I did some spicy takes with some folks in the community, and one particular individual dropped that platform engineering is dead. And in a lot of ways, um, it is and it isn't, right? Like I think the idea of what we tried to do with platform engineering is that I think what we're doing towards achieving the ideals behind it still exists, and it's probably going to be called something else maybe a few months from now or a year from now.
Yes, yeah, they say that whenever like someone says like X is dead, they are basically giving more time, and that's showing like
Exactly. You're just adding
they don't
longevity
need
to
to
my
be alive.
problem.
Yeah, probably yes. Nice. So I think we have a couple of questions, so we can try to get this through, and then we keep going. But of course, this is it's very interesting, and again, I think we are talking more about like definitions, but we should also think about like why do we need another word? And I think DevOps is one of the fields that has more buzzwords. I don't know. I mean, it's not a race, but probably DevOps would win it if it was a race. We have one question from X because we're also live on X now. Something about the jobs. So, do you have an idea, or maybe what would be like your strategy to support someone who is looking for hiring or getting a job in DevOps? What do you
Yeah.
think is our place?
I would recommend there's a few places you can look, right? But there's also a few things you can use to add to that search. So Y Combinator and a lot of other like, you know, I'd say VC companies out there tend to list out their companies that they invest in, but also tend to host job boards on behalf of those companies as well. And a lot of those startups tend to look for DevOps engineers or platform engineers or SREs. That's one part of it. The second part of it is to actually think about the skill set and the technologies that you'll probably be playing with. If you have to work with GitLab or GitHub, if you're working with something like Argo, if you're working with some GitOps type technologies, if you're working with Kubernetes or even Docker, a little bit of cloud as well. And then you start to see things like, reliability in that job description, or you start to see things like automation or even CI/CD. You're definitely looking at DevOps like or DevOps adjacent or even DevOps specific roles. So you want to associate keywords, key technologies to those particular jobs that you're after, because then that narrows your search down. There's so many jobs out there, interestingly enough, that they're so mistitled and misleading in what that actually that function actually is, that a job that says you're a platform engineer might actually mean you're a DevOps engineer, or it might actually mean you're a sales engineer, or it means something entirely different. And so to read that specific description will be very telling of the kinds of activities that you'll be doing. If there's any indication of you being on call or you having to build something for internal systems, it's likely going to be something of a DevOps role. Junior roles, I'm going to be honest, right? Junior and internship roles tend to be less and less now, especially since a lot of companies are really trying to spend less time onboarding and spend more time on just extracting value immediately. It's just the nature of where we are in the market today. That's not to say that junior and internships do not exist. Where they probably exist are probably at the larger companies because they've got the bandwidth and they've got the available capital to support these kinds of these roles as well. So look at big companies if you're looking for that internship. And I say that because you want structure as well. You don't want to go to a startup where they don't have an established program for juniors or internships. And startups don't look for juniors or interns because they are very much in the mindset of go, 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 let's get stuff done. And I don't know, Francesco, let me know if I can swear or not, but let's get stuff done and effectively move the ball forward. At a massive organization, that's a little different, right? Because they've realized things that do and don't work, and they'd rather take a little bit more of a slower approach in onboarding you, making sure you are very familiar with all their systems, you have all the access you need, you understand the ideal profile of who they work with in terms of their customers, their clientele, and then also understand the technology. Like they want you to figure all of that out before they decide you're ready to go. And that's a distinction too, right? Between working in a large corporation or an enterprise versus a smaller startup, right? There's going to be positives and benefits to both. For someone that's looking for their internship or junior role, try to avoid startups. You're going to have a very tough time, especially if you don't have some of the basics or fundamentals locked down. There are people out there that have started their roles, at a startup and whatnot, and that's okay too, right? There's nothing wrong with that. It's just that if you're the kind of person that looks for structure and you're looking to truly learn, and you don't want just like everything in your face because it's so fast moving or fast paced, look at the enterprises. There are a lot of them out there that will slow roll you into the role and make sure that you feel ramped up in an appropriate amount of time.
Yes, I agree, and I can understand that sometimes we can't choose. Like it will be in an ideal world, we will receive two offers, one from a startup and one from a corporate of the same exact amount of salary, and then we can choose. But this is not reality. But I understand, and I think that ideally, for example, I think this has also been my case. For example, I was really into DevOps since 2015, but then I ended up doing a full stack development role, even if I was like a lot into the DevOps like learning procedure, learning phase. So I don't know, but of course, the best of luck, Mod. I hope that you got your answer here, and of course, best of luck. But you mean, I think it's also I think you can find a DevOps junior position, but I think that for most of the people, at least that I know, usually people who worked in DevOps, they didn't like only worked in DevOps. I don't know if you are an exception to this, but most of the people, they have, I don't know, background in other fields, and then they have also some knowledge into the DevOps field. Probably you are an exception of
Yeah.
this.
No, actually, you're absolutely right.
No.
You would have one of two backgrounds. You would actually have an operations background. So you used to be the sysadmin. I used to be the sysadmin where I would fix problems, fix systems, do tape backups, all that fun stuff. Or you come from the development side where you actually build applications, you're building automation. Actually, in your applications, you're automating more than you know. And that same principle and mindset just needs to be married to the operations stuff. Operations is really about upkeep, keeping the lights on. Can things actually move forward? And with the development side, you're just basically turning all of that into code. And the best example I can probably provide for you, and this is a little bit of a plug too for Pulumi, is Pulumi. Pulumi is a company that actually lets you use those development practices to implement DevOps or implement infrastructure that supports some of your DevOps tooling and processes. And that is probably the closest thing to being a developer while operating operational tools than anything I can think of. We could also, get into the whole HashiCorp and Terraform bit as well, because that's another angle that's also where it all started too, with respect to DevOps.
Yes, thank you. Would you like to make like a quick crash tutorial, like a 30 seconds, so a reel, a live reel about Pulumi, like what is Pulumi, so we introduce them to the audience.
Yeah, and a little shout out to Kat Morgan, because Kat's the one that taught me all about Pulumi. But effectively, you want to build an app and you want to deploy it on infrastructure, you can do so with any flavor of programming language that you want, whether it be Python, TypeScript, Go, C Sharp. And all it really is just understanding how Pulumi's libraries interact with these infrastructure providers and simultaneously your code or your application. But as a developer, it's going to sound and look very natural to you. As an operator, it's also going to look and sound natural to you, because you'll start to begin to realize the patterns of development or your operational tools that you've always worked with. For an operator, that's me. For a developer, they'll see, I can write this in Python, I can write this in TypeScript. Let's go, baby.
And we use Pulumi at Daily Dev, shameless plug also, Daily Dev and
Yeah,
Pulumi,
yeah.
so everyone is happy. I would
I
say.
love it.
Nice. Nice. Thank you. Thank you so much, Marino. We had a question about FinOps. I don't know. I think I heard this term a couple of times. I don't know if it's relevant to, if you want to answer this. FinOps related to DevOps or software? I mean, how it could be
FinOps
improved in
is
that field? But is it
yeah.
related?
So FinOps is a subset of DevOps, right?
Mm.
Or it could be an adjacent piece too, if you want to look at it that way. But FinOps is really all about making sure that you've analyzed resource efficiency, right? You've looked at your resources and you're cost optimized, or you're using all available resources at all times. Now, to improve it is like implementing practices around prioritizing how you spend, right? And then also using available tools like cost explorer tools or cost optimization tools that, one, are working off of a baseline, right? Because we already know like how much we want to spend, but two, also leveraging heuristics and analysis to better understand, should we have right sized these workloads accordingly, and how does that affect how much we spend? That is effectively what FinOps is. That could be translated to something you do in AWS if you're just operating in the AWS cloud and they've got tools to help you with FinOps there. Or in the world of Kubernetes, we've got tools like what Commodore does with cost optimization, or some other open source tools that analyze costs in your environment as well. But it's really looking for the optimization and balance of it all.
Nice. Thank you. Thank you so much, Marino. I hope we got. I think we covered both of these questions. If you still have more questions, you can write them below. And now we have one question. I don't know if we can also link it to the DevOps and platform engineering things, which is like your experience with conferences and public speaking. Because we met in London. I almost never have time, like, also to check other speakers' talks, because most of the times, of course, you understand, I'm checking my own presentation. Usually, sometimes I prepare them on the flight to the conference, so I always consider that good time on the plane. I don't know if it's the same for you. So yeah, what about like your experience with conferences, DevOps, platform engineering? Like, did you made like some talks that you really liked?
So, conferences are fun. I love them because you get the opportunity to just meet a lot of people, right? But then when
Like
you
me.
realize you actually have to, yeah, when you have to hop on stage, like it's like, damn it, gotta hop on stage. I actually have to prepare something. And you're right. I am very last minute at times where I've got an abstract all scoped out. And, back then when I wrote it, I was thinking about like X, Y, and Z. And then I realized, okay, I've got to present this. And now X, Y, Z, I don't even remember why I even came up with this idea. And I somehow have to fit a narrative or build a narrative. And what's interesting is when you go back and look at that abstract, you begin to realize, I understand why I built this. I know what I need to build for either a slide deck or a demo to get my point across. One thing I've tried to do over the last couple of years is, and especially since I've gone to a lot of DevOps days, is tied networking as a technology to a lot of those DevOps days and themes of those conferences, because you're effectively taking networking and adding it into this world of DevOps. Net DevOps, it exists. It's automation for networking and doing the same declarative stuff you would do with Kubernetes and even virtual machines in the cloud. But what's really cool about conferences is you go there, you deliver your talk, and then you sit in a bunch of other talks, and then you're like, shh, damn, I wish I actually put that idea in my talk. But you realize that you've got other opportunities to do that talk again. You can incorporate those ideas that you picked up. I've done this before so many times where I've given a talk and then later on I've seen something and it's like, I could have delivered this differently, or I could have said this way, or that's an expanded idea that maybe I'll spend more time on that because I'm going to give credit to this other speaker as well. And then now, you're building community that way as well. Because, when you think about talks, a lot of people will influence how your talk looks as well. And it's because of the learnings that you picked up along the way. Sometimes I'm scrolling the Twitter timeline or X timeline, and I'll come across an idea and it's like, that actually is a better explanation on this topic that I'm about to talk about than I could ever come up with. Let me use it. Let me bring it up and even give them credit for it, or even like screenshot that tweet and share it in my presentation. And that's why I love doing this stuff too. Now, granted, conferences 2 years ago versus today are starting to be a little bit different because you start to look at the economic pressures that affect conference budgets, who can fly out there, how many people can attend a conference, and it has this overall cyclical pattern of, if we don't have enough attendees, how can we justify someone coming out here, or how can someone actually justify their speaking slot? So now it's really about how can we be a little bit more intentional, be a little bit more specific with our audience, drive more impact, I should say, for that talk that we deliver, right? So it means when you're selected for that conference, understand the track that you're in. If it's a single track, then it should be easy enough to understand the theme of the conference, and make sure your talk actually fits. Make sure that the audience is going to walk away with a few things, right? One, they'll probably walk away with maybe a new friend because they met you on stage or afterwards. But two, they walk away with some lessons that either has them thinking about how they can reform their career, or maybe even helps them solve a problem at their day job that they probably couldn't even think about, but you just came on stage and said it and solved their problem for them. That's the other reason why, it's good to do conference talks too, because you're helping people in the community. You're also building your profile. I think it's a valuable thing to do to build your brand over the course of your tech career or career in general, because as people start to see you more on stage, they also associate that to your credibility, and they want to trust you more. They want to bring you to their own events even more, and you become their specialist for that event, or you become their main character for that event. And that's important too, because look, as people become more familiar with what you do, who you are, that opens the door to job opportunities or other kinds of partnerships. Or maybe if you're in the freelancing market or you're running your own company, that opens the door to more clients, right? It's just how you think longer term with what that single talk engagement can do. Look, for me, it started with one talk I did at VMware a long time ago. That was at VMworld, which I used to get my next talk. And you keep using your talks to get next talks, because now people can see how you've improved. And then you can also see how you've improved, but you can also see how the talks that you've done previously are helping you get to the stages like KubeCon or reInvent, or maybe like We Are Devs, right? These are pretty large conferences that you have a lot of people that show up in that audience. And of that audience, there are people that want to make decisions and they want to move quickly. And maybe you work for an organization that, aligns to some of those challenges. And now you just become the hero for your organization and theirs too, right? And that's why you do these things. That's why I do these things. I'm so sorry, Emma, I keep going on forever, but it's just one of those things I don't get to talk about a lot. But yeah, I thank Francesco for giving me the opportunity to.
No, I'm doing this podcast exactly for this, because we are always in a hurry. We barely we have time to take a selfie during conferences. No jokes. So when I invite you or someone else here, we need to sit here for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and we can talk. So I love this, and of course. So yes, and I really like this approach to go to conferences and try, you go to conferences also to understand how you can deliver better talks, how you can even change the structure. You say, oh, that person put this, like, I don't know, a QR code at the end of the presentation. Like, the small things, of course, they are details, but it's a part of the, like of the knowledge of going to conferences to deliver better talks. And I'm a huge fan of saying this. I will keep repeating this, that, like, the talk is not about your ego and, like, showcasing that you are so cool, but trying to deliver something useful. Because like, for me, it's mind blowing that someone takes the plane from another part of the world. I mean, they're not coming just for you, that will be too much, but they still decided to attend your talk, to sit, to take their time. And for me, I will never get used to this. Like, I don't know, whether there are like hundreds, thousands of people sitting, and in that case, you want to deliver something which is useful. And I think it is also a trick to alleviate the stress and anxiety, because it's not about you, but it's about someone else. So it's also a trick to get to be more relaxed, because it's not more about me getting anxious on the stage, but it's about to I'm focused on the message. And thank you so much for remembering me that I have to prepare 2 presentations in about a week. Thank you, Marino. So yes, I was preparing the presentation before now. I wish that this was like my full-time job, but I do this like during weekends, and, as I said, during the flight or the night before. So yes, nice. Marino, can you talk like 2 minutes about the conference you are organizing? Because I barely know this. I
Yeah,
can't promise, but I hope that in 2025 or at some
5, yeah.
point I'll find the time. I've never been to Canada as a speaker to a conference, so this might change in the future. So I would like to know more, like, because also, like, from an organizer perspective. So interested about this. I think that I mean, just organizing like a one-on-one live is not that easy. Think about organizing a conference.
Yeah, it's a different beast, I'll tell you that much. And I will say it started off with Hoop Huddle in Edinburgh back in 2023, and that was no, 2022 actually. That was the first time I met Emma too, because I actually tried to convince her to come out to the conference. She came up to Edinburgh though, and we hung out for a little bit, so that was fantastic. But the conference itself was nice because it was small. It was about 200-ish people, and it was intimate enough that you could still have good conversations with folks that showed up, still attend talks. It wasn't in your face like some of the larger ones like KubeCon or reInvent, which are massive at scale. Um, but you're now able to have some more directed conversations and even tune into some of the interesting topics that come up. I love the vibe of the conference, and I began to realize if I wanted to do something in Toronto, I have a blueprint right here. So David Flanagan was the original creator of Kube Huddle. He hasn't run one yet after that event, so I've been kind of running my own. And I ran the first one in Toronto last year, which was a 2-day event. We had some just under 200 attendees show up, and it was good. I think I just overextended myself in terms of how many different things we had going on at that conference. And as great as it was, as I had some excellent feedback come in, I realized to make this a little bit more streamlined for this year, for 2024, let's make it no more than 2 tracks, and let's make it a single day. So there's more emphasis on local folks. There's more, there's less costs overall being thrown around, or less money being thrown around, and potentially just not optimally used, right? Because we're talking about ticket sales and sponsorships and even food and venue costs and whatnot. And that all adds up, right? But you try to do it in a very efficient manner so that your audience that shows up maximizes what they're able to get out of the event, also connect with folks, and then even learn, from other peers, and maybe find out if they have a new opportunity at another company. But it's in the Toronto market, and we haven't done conferences well enough in the last little while. And so I want to keep doing this in Toronto because we have tech talent here. We have folks that have great stories to tell. And we also have a bunch of folks that need to learn from these stories also. And that's why we have Kube Huddle in Toronto. The one that's coming up very soon is happening in less than 2 weeks on May 7th. We're still selling tickets. So, go check out ca.kubehuddle.com. Francesco shared the link. Go grab your ticket if you're local to Toronto, or if you want to fly into, that's totally fine as well. Reach out if you want a discount. I might be able to hook you up there too. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be a great event. We have a lot of speakers. We have a lot of great attendees coming by. Our sponsors are supporting this event. We couldn't do it without them. But I just want to shout out to my team, my organizing team, Diana, Adriana, Bailey, Akansha, and even Kunal. You're all doing a fantastic job. And if it weren't for you, I don't think we'd have a Coop Huddle this year.
Wow, and I think that you have really invited me, but maybe it's this. I think that I couldn't join, but at some point I will try to fix this bug. And yes, so a huge shout out to all the people who are organizing, because I think that starting to organizing a conference, something that I didn't do so far, organizing some small online events, that it was already kind of mess. I don't even want to think like what would be doing this in person, but I want to believe that this is worth, like even like this, all this traveling or this organization. I hope that this creates like, I don't know, a different level of connection, like we did, like we met in London. So it's a lot of a lot of planes and tickets and stuff. But I want to believe that in the long term, this creates, like, the real network. Of course, per word intended. So yes, Marino. Yes. So thank you so much for this, and I really like your style, how you also like do the spaces, the even the technical ones, but also on the human part. I saw you made many spaces in the past. I think it was with the Pulumi team. I think you made the man
Yeah,
some.
yeah. I've been doing some spaces with Kat Morgan from Palumi, and we keep doing them. It's just the last few weeks have been a little bit busy with a lot of different things going on with Coop Huddle, so we've kind of had to like park that for a bit. But we have a space going on tomorrow at 10 a.m. Eastern. Yeah, and it's
Wow,
actually
I
about,
didn't know
yeah.
this. Yeah.
Yeah, it's actually about C# and the intersection of development practices in C# and Kubernetes too. And what's really cool about that one is not a long time ago, maybe about 3 months ago, someone DM'd me on Twitter, and I couldn't identify who it was. And I looked at that DM, I read it a little bit, I looked at the profile, and I realized, damn, I went to school with this cat. Like, we went to school together like years ago, and we got to chatting, and I began to realize that he's now moved on to Microsoft as a development manager. But it's interesting because we all share the same C# struggles with things like linked lists years ago. And so I decided, you know what, let's bring him back on stage, or let's bring him on stage to talk about a little bit of his history, a little bit about how we went to school together, and then also his like journey to C# and what he's seen with that. And I'm going to bring in the Kubernetes dimension of it too, because we want to talk a little bit about career. We want to talk about tech. We want to make it also available to devs and people that operate Kubernetes, and find the balance between all three of those. And that's why we're having that space tomorrow. So Kat will also be on there too. It's going to be exciting to hear her perspectives, and she is from Pulumi. So it's nice to have this kind of balance.
Yes, thank you, and yes, you see, I make these live events, so now I know that tomorrow you have a space. I didn't know this, for example. So like maybe I'm focused also on, let's say, on getting back to social media, because I've been like traveling, doing stuff around the world, many things happening also in my life. So yes, that's now I know this. Marino, before we close today, I would like maybe you, if you want to, maybe to give a final message, especially, I don't know, for people who would like to getting started, because this is what I would like to focus on. I think that this, I'd like to make something that, I don't know, would have been useful for me like 10 years ago. Like maybe there are some people who are really curious about Docker, or about like all these DevOps tools, or maybe, I don't know, they found some tools that are getting curious more into the DevOps rather than the coding or the sysadmin thing. So what do you think is like the best way to get involved in DevOps, if you want to make this a career or a part of your career? I can say that DevOps is a part of my career. I don't know if you know that before Daily Dev, I was a DevRel in a DevOps focused company. So, for example, this also helped me to get into DevRel, DevOps. So, in some ways, helped me a lot. So, what do you think is like the best way to, let's say, to grow professionally in the DevOps and platform engineering area?
So there are a few things I would suggest. One, obviously follow the folks on Twitter like Francesco, because even though there's a lot of different areas that you cover, DevOps is a good chunk of it too, right? Especially the Docker stuff that you dive into as well. That has association to even some of the Rust stuff that you're doing, right? When you think about that, there is marriage there. So folks should check that out. But if you wanted to start, right, if you needed a starting place, pick up some old hardware, whether it's a Dell Optiplex desktop or some Raspberry Pis, and try to deploy Kubernetes or Docker on top of it. And then try to run an application on that. And then try to scale that application on your little environment. Once you get to that point, repeat that entire process, but with automation. So use a little bash to script it all to see how far you can get and how much you can slim down in terms of time you're spending on the keyboard. And then feed that into a CI/CD system and tie that into version control so that you get familiar with things like Git. You get familiar with working with something like Argo or Argo CD, and you get familiar with working with Docker and Kubernetes as well, because all these pieces intersect with each other in so many different ways. In fact, I'm surprised we never even talked about the HashiCorp bit too, because I feel like there's a lot of relevancy here too. I'll get to that in a second, but for folks starting out, the home lab approach will get you really far. If you can't, get a home lab, a lot of the stuff I just described is doable in the public cloud too with free credits. You have to start somewhere, right? And I think that if you start learning things like Git, understanding how to use a Linux operating system, and then familiarizing yourself with even working with Docker and a little bit of Kubernetes, you're going to go very far. And that's where I recommend folks normally start. Everything else will fall into place. Now, I bring up HashiCorp because right before we hopped on and went live, Francesco brought it up, and I want to talk a little bit about HashiCorp, what they do, what's going on in the last little while, and the most recent news, right? So a long time ago, and let's go back to 10 years ago, because it's always a great number to pick. 10 years ago, when we wanted to automate infrastructure, there were a limited set of tools and systems out there. One specific one was called Terraform, which allowed us to build infrastructure as code. We basically build files that basically told us what our infrastructure would look like. We'd pass it through some parser. That parser would connect out to some infrastructure system and then deploy the infrastructure for us. What did that mean? I want a virtual machine that had 4 gigs of RAM and 2 vCPUs, and I wanted it to run Ubuntu. That comes in the form of a document, which some interpreter understands and then outputs that as a virtual machine on, let's say, vSphere or in AWS. That's what Terraform did. Now, Terraform is open source, but then if you need support and you need licensing and you need, advanced features, or you need something a little bit more enterprise, you need a company to be able to do that. So you have HashiCorp that has entered the chat and has offered this for the longest time. So, on one hand, they're offering enterprise products and offerings. Terraform happens to be one of them, but there are other systems as well that they offered too. And then you've also got an open source community that's been adding into that Terraform code base. Don't want to get political here, but what happened recently was that HashiCorp decided to implement something called a BSL license that effectively meant that they would just go into a much more enterprise route. And, we could go on for hours about this, but I'd let you all do the reading. As a result of that, a new open source fork was born called OpenTofu, which is still Terraform, and you have a bunch of companies supporting it. But it is to keep the essence of open source Terraform. Now, more recently, a company called IBM, which some of you might know of, they've been around for a very long time, acquired HashiCorp, or actually just literally as recent as yesterday, acquired HashiCorp. And the reason you see something like this happen, and let's talk about tech and consolidation. Back in 2021, the market was flush with cash. And it was because we had this zero interest rate period. Borrowing money was free. Like, I could borrow money for free and I didn't have to pay anyone for it, right? And when companies have access to that, they can do so many things. But the thing is, getting money for free or borrowing money for free doesn't last forever. And so when it doesn't last forever, and when interest rates start rising, now costs go up in different ways. And now companies have to assess, how do they reduce their costs, their expenses, so that they can afford to keep up with paying debt payments. I'm simplifying this, but when you start to see that things are becoming more expensive, borrowing is expensive, that means a lot of companies are falling into debt. They have a lot of IP, like intellectual property, they have great software, but they're not executing on sales, enough sales to be able to keep up with the rising costs of borrowing costs. So what you have happening is the companies that do have money, well, I see that you're struggling. And this is not, I'm not saying this is the example of HashiCorp, but I'm saying I see you that you're struggling. You have some good logos, some companies I want to get into. You have some great technology. Maybe you're not struggling, but it would be a good fit if you joined us, right? So there's always like going to be a cultural assessment. The legal stuff happens behind the scenes, and really only executives know about this deal that's going to happen until it gets so close to the point that someone either leaks it or someone officially says, hey, we're going to go buy this company. And when that happens, you see the market react. You see a company like HashiCorp shoots up in value a little bit because now they have a landing zone. They went IPO and now they're going to be purchased by someone else, which means shareholders see a lot more value to that. Other people see values in different ways. There might be losers on that end. But let's go back to tech consolidation for a second. Back in 2021, we had all these companies pop out of nowhere saying they could do X, Y, and Z, but could not deliver on X and Y, and maybe a little bit of Z. And so in 2024, companies will end up being either acquired or acquiring other companies because of that, because we need to consolidate. There's too much saturation now, too many people doing the same thing, and we need to cut back on the noise. That's not to say that IBM saw HashiCorp as noise. It also means that when larger companies are looking for a good way to expand upon their strategy, they're going to assess the market. And for someone like IBM, well, I've already got Red Hat. Red Hat's doing a lot of great stuff for me, building out great, compute and workload platforms. I also need to tap into the automation market and the infrastructure as code market. And that's where HashiCorp comes into the play here. Now, there might be overlap with the technologies in some ways, and we can get into that as well. But the reality is, we're going to see more and more of that acquisition happen. If you are big enough of a company that you're adding enough value, someone bigger is going to come around and say, hey, I want to buy you. And you think that smaller company is going to say no? Absolutely not. Because founders love exits.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't feel to judge them. It depends on your goal of the company, and I think that it's. I mean, from the founder perspective, this can also be the goal why you created this company. Of course we don't know all the deals that they had, but I can say that we saw huge acquisitions. I think that even from IBM we saw many. Let's say from the tech perspective, let's say in the recent years, and this is another piece of the puzzle. So IBM has been, let's say, around for a while. If you don't know about IBM, you're probably very young, so that's probably the only reason, because it was very very big, like even especially some decades ago. And we'll see. But this is today's news that as they close the deal. Like, of course, we're talking about billions of dollars, and we'll see how IBM will, let's say, they called joined IBM or acquisition, call it whatever you want, but that's the thing, I would say. So Marino, you came prepared because of course this wasn't planned, this question about HashiCorp. So I'm happy that we had this already planned and we could share and shed some lights about this. I'm very happy that you joined this event with me today. We need to make more collaborations for sure in 2024 or next year. I wish you best of luck with your conference that you're organizing. I will check, and of course I'll mute you because I will have too much FOMO. So just for that week, and I'm joking, I'll check all the pictures. I really can't judge after posting pictures of literally all the conferences and all the parts of the world. So I really can't judge here. And yes, Graham, you are the guy who came at the end of the party, so you're about too late, but you can still say hi, no worries. And yes, so thank you so much, Marino. I really appreciate your work, what you're doing. I I wish you best of luck for your future goals, future things. If you want to do something, of course, always about DevOps. I'm down even before you propose the thing. And yes, that's it. Some final thoughts, final bye, and then we can say we can stop for today. Today is also holiday for me in Italy, so you can see me very relaxed. So I took like a whole
Oh,
day off. It was a holiday, so I really took all the day to prepare for this.
I sincerely appreciate this, Francesco, and honestly, the opportunity to come on here and just chat about a lot of the stuff that's gone on in my career and in the industry. I thank you so much for giving me that platform. And to all that are listening, right, I encourage you to not only follow Francesco, but see a lot of the work he's done over the years. I've learned from Francesco, so all of you can, right? And you'll also find other people that you can learn from through his channel and through his platform. So go take a look at that. Francesco, I hope we get to run into each other physically in person at a conference at some point very soon. So I'm looking forward to that. Have a great rest of your day, and I hope you enjoy your holiday today.
Yes, that's it. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Marino. You have been too kind, I would say. But yeah, I never say no, so it's good to get some compliments from time to time for the work. And I always, of course, appreciate what you do. And sometimes we are so busy doing our own stuff that we don't even know what's the impact that we have on the outside when we deliver a talk, when we post something, when we make a video. So the feedback is always very highly appreciated. And yes, I invite your haircut, Marino, now since you're here. But no, joking. But I recognize him because of the haircut when we went to London. So, of course, it's one of a kind. Nice. Thank you so much, Marino. And we are done for today. So I'm preparing another episode with a big guest coming back on this channel next week, which is Web Dev Simplified. Kyle, he has almost 2 million subscribers on YouTube and has been creating like a huge amount of content. But I still have to find a headshot of him. This will be next week. Marino, thank you again and best of luck. I left a link to the conference, your conference, and your Twitter account below, so be sure to check it out and support, of course, this conference. Thank you so much, Marino. Bye bye,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Bye bye. Bye bye, Graham. Bye bye. One moment.